Okay, so on the very front slide, you'll see here, obviously this is about service, okay? And you might remember from last year, whenever we are taking notes in an outline, there's lots of information. Some of it you need, some of it you don't. So my note-taking tip, can't remember if I said this last year. If I did, how many times I said it, but if it's in red on the screen, put it in lead or ink, okay? So if you see anything that is in red, then it'll go into your outline. Did I say that last year? I hear some yeahs and some no's. Okay. All right. Well, that'll be your key as far as what to put into your notes. Okay? So why are we starting with service? Well, to me, why wouldn't we start with service? Because as an 8th grader, being of service to others is really what it's all about. So we're going to today cover an outline that's going to talk about why, as Christians, we need to be of service to others. I'm going to share with you some stories about some people. Some of them are pretty famous stories. Some of them you would never have heard of before. But they're examples of people who have provided service in one way or the other. We're also going to talk about the corporal works of mercy, if you don't already know those, and then that'll cover the outline. Okay. All right, so I think the very first item, obviously at the very top, you'll see that the word service in Greek is diakonia. Diakonia. In the Greek, the word service is diakonia. And I actually have a little trivia question there at the very beginning, at the top of your paper. And I think it says, what word, it's a vocational word, in our church vocabulary derives from that? And I'm asking because you might actually have a chance to get this right. The Greek word diakonia means service. Does anyone know what word in our church's institutional vocabulary derives from the word diakonia? Any takers on this? I mean, like the word's very similar. Is it Gabriel? That's right. That's right, deacon. Okay, our church deacons in Greek means one who serves. So if you think of Deacon Mike, and when I think of deacons, he's the first person I think of, their job is to be of service to their parish. Okay, they help serve the priest. So that is exactly right. So you're 1 for 1. All right, you're batting 1,000. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the next item on your list here. And again, as you know, the outlines are typically right in sequence. Okay, why service? Why is service so important? So I'm going to, rather than ask you, I'm going to give you a nice short description about why, as Christians, we need to be of service. So it's in red, so put it in lead, or put it in ink. We are called through our baptism as Christians to serve others. We are called through baptism as Christians to serve others. So the short answer to this is, why do we need to be of service to others? It's because of our baptism. Okay? When you were baptized, whether as an infant or as an adult, or as a young person, obviously, young adult, you basically were signing up for a lifetime of service. Okay? Some people join the military, and if they're lucky, they might be able to do 20 years and retire. When you're baptized, you are signing up for a lifetime of service, okay, by virtue of our baptism. In fact, on your service hour sheets, I don't know if you've ever taken the time to actually read what's on those that I gave to you every month. Anybody ever sit down and say, you know what, I'm going to read this thing? Anybody ever sit down and read the service hour sheet that I gave you? Okay, well, you have one right in front of you. If you look near the very top, it says, by virtue of our baptism, we are called to serve others. Okay? It's right there in the document. So, and again, I didn't invent that. Okay? This is very standard truth, that your baptism signed you up to be of service to others. Okay, so here's my first story that I want to share with you. And you might actually know this story. Some of the stories I'm going to share today, you won't know, but this one you might have a chance to know. So, we're going to go to Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, verse 40. And this is actually a parable. Okay? Remember we did parables last year?
Yep.
Each of you had one that you were assigned to? Okay, all right. So I can't remember, because my memory's not that great, of who might have done this parable, but there is the parable of the sheep and the goats. It's also known as the judgment of nations. Is there anybody that is sitting at your desk saying, oh yeah, that was me, I did that one? I mean, maybe they're not in here, okay? All right, so the parable of the sheep and the goats, also known as the judgment of nations. Does anyone know what happens in this short parable that Jesus tells? Anybody happen to remember that one? Well, in this parable, I'll refresh your memory, Jesus talks about when the Son of Man returns. All right, using that phrase, Son of Man. In other words, when Jesus returns someday, he will judge all nations. Now, when he says all nations, he means all people. Not just the Jewish people, but the Jews, Gentiles, all people in all lands. And he says he will come and he will judge them. And he will separate them, okay, for judgment. Does anyone know where this parable's going? He will come and judge the nations, and they'll be separated. They're going to be separated into two groups. You know what the two groups are? Any takers on this? It's a short answer. He's going to separate. Yes, Agent.
Sinners and not sinners?
Well, in essence, that's what the parable is going to talk about, those who are sinful and those who are not. He's going to identify them as either being sheep or goats. Okay? Now, in the context of salvation, is it better to be a sheep or a goat? Not based on how cute they look. But in the Bible, is it better to be a sheep or a goat? I heard a goat over here. It's actually sheep.
Yeah.
Okay? You want to be the sheep. And he says he'll put the sheep on the right and the goats on the left. All right? Not to offend any of those people that are left-handed, but that's just the direction that they went. So you're either going to be put into the herd of sheep or the herd of goats. Now, how are they going to be judged? Well, they're going to be judged based on one thing, one criteria. So here's another red item for you. And you've probably heard this before. Okay? The phrase is, whatsoever you did for one of these least brothers of mine, you did for me. So if you want to go ahead and put that down there. Whatsoever you did for one of these least brothers of mine, or sisters, you did for me. Now, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself in the parable. That's kind of the conclusion. In the story, though, the people that are judged and either put on the left or the right then ask the king, because they describe he's like a king. They're like, well, why am I on this side? Or why am I on that side? You know, why are you judging me that way? And the king says, well, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me water. When I didn't have a place to stay, you gave me a place to stay. When I was sick or in prison, you came and visited me. And the people, especially the ones that were condemned, were like, well, we didn't see you hungry. I mean, you're the king. I mean, you were never hungry. You get everything you want. I never saw you without clothing. You didn't need a place to stay. You were never in prison. When did that ever happen? And that's when the king says this. Well, whatever you did for the least of my brothers, in other words, the poorest of the poor, the people that are really of no account, they have no power or social standing, when you helped those people, you were helping me. So for the people that were judged and put on the right with the sheep, they were pleasantly surprised. Okay? They were like, oh, wow, I didn't know we were helping the king. All that time when we were, giving to the poor, we were actually giving to the king, or it was the same idea. Okay? So that's why they were rewarded for helping out the least of their brothers and sisters. Now, the flip side of that, for those who were given the condemnation, and you don't have to write this down because it's not in red, but he flipped it around for the ones who were like, what did we do? We never saw you hungry or thirsty. And he said, well, whatever you didn't do for the least of my brothers and sisters, you didn't do for me. So that would be like telling the king, I'm not interested in helping you. Okay? So it was a rude awakening for those people that will be put on the left with the goats. Okay? So the message here of the parable is obvious, that we will all be judged on how we have helped others. And those people that are in most need of help, are the ones that we need to really take care of, because it would be like taking care of Jesus. Okay? None of us could ever imagine walking by Jesus and saying, I'm not going to help him. I mean, nobody in their right mind would do that. All right. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on here in the outline. So I have another story that I want to share with you about these are all examples of people providing service or being of service to others. Let's go back to Matthew's Gospel. Here's a passage that you're probably familiar with. It's in Matthew chapter 27. And this man, they pressed into service to carry his cross. There's the word service. Now, this is softball. Okay, you can hit this into left field for a double. Who is this person that Matthew's Gospel describes carrying his cross? Let's see, Anna. Very good. Simon of Cyrene. Not only did you get his first name, you got the place where he was from. So Simon of Cyrene. See the blank on your paper where it says, and they pressed into service? Go ahead and put Simon of Cyrene, who, of course, has been immortalized in the Stations of the Cross. Anybody remember what station Simon helping carry the cross is? Addie, your hand went up really quick.
Is it 5?
Yes, it is 5. Yeah, the 5th station. Okay? The 5th station of the cross. Okay? Very good. All right, so why is Simon such a great model of service? Well, you know, this is really all the Bible says about him. Okay? He's one of those biblical figures that literally is given a line in each of the Gospels, and then that's it. Okay? That's really all that we know, other than the fact that he was from Cyrene. Now, if I had my wonderful laminated map of the Roman Empire around the year 14 A.D., I'd be able to show you where Cyrene is, but of course that map is upstairs in my classroom. So you're just going to have to kind of visualize what the old Roman Empire looked like. Of course, I'm sure you remember where Judea was located, because we talked about it 100 times last year. And then down around Egypt, down in North Africa, there was a province called Cyrene. So Simon was from that area, okay? But we really don't know much else about him. I mean, he was, you might say, well, why was a man from Cyrene in Jerusalem at the time when Jesus was being led to his crucifixion?
Yes.
Well, if you remember, what was going on in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus'
from
execution?
Mrs. Forrestal's room for Emma Boyce, and a box
Remember what was
of
going on in
supplies
Jerusalem at the
for
time
Boo.
that Jesus was being executed? Here's a good old
Were
review
they
question.
pre-ordered boxes?
It was like a big festival. There was a big festival going on in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus' trial and then execution. Any takers? Okay, Anna, you're the one.
Passover?
Yeah, it was Passover. I remember Passover, that Jewish
Were they
feast
pre-ordered boxes?
was being celebrated.
Is it
So,
Brian's
if we
class?
connect the dots here, they think Simon was probably
And
a
Boyce
Jew
is in Forrestal,
who
pre-ordered.
lived in Africa, and he had made the journey all the way to Judea to celebrate the Passover. And then he just happens to be standing along the road when a few criminals, and of course Jesus, were being led to be crucified there in the city. Okay, now I want you to look at the words that the Bible uses here. This man they pressed into service. What does that mean? Yeah, if you're pressed into it, it means that he was taken and he wasn't asked. Okay? You know, a little bit ago I asked all of you if you would be interested in being on flag patrol. Okay. Simon was not asked, hey, can you help us out here? This guy's really struggling carrying the cross, and we really need to get him to the place of his execution so he can be killed. Okay? That's not the way it worked. The Bible says clearly the Romans, the detail of soldiers, grabbed him and said, here, you're going to do this. So he didn't really have much of a choice in the matter. Now, what we don't know is how he reacted. Okay? We don't know if he was, he didn't have a choice in the matter, but did he go and say, okay, yeah, I'll do this? Did he grumble and say, well, why me? Why don't you get that guy over there? All right? He's a lot stronger than I am. So we don't know how Simon embraced it, whether he did it cheerfully, not to say he'd be cheerful about something like that, but how about did he go about it? But what we do know is that he did carry the cross. Okay, we know that he did it. Why do we know it? Well, the Bible says that he did, and of course he has been immortalized in our traditional Stations of the Cross as helping Jesus carry that. Okay? All right, so I got a few things I want to mention here. They don't need to go into your notes, but I want to mention a couple lessons that Simon teaches, which, by the way, I can't remember if I said this last year or not, but the fifth station is kind of my favorite station of the cross. Now, I know it's kind of weird to have a favorite station, but of the 14, this is the one that I always, when I see it, I'm always kind of intrigued by it. This idea that this man who just happened to be there ends up becoming really the center of the event, or at least a big part of it. Okay? All right, so these are just some lessons that I think Simon's story teaches. First bullet point here, again, you don't need to put it down. You may be in a place where people need your help. Okay? Simon just happened to be along the road there when Jesus was being led to his execution. And, of course, he was chosen to be the one that was going to help Jesus carry the cross. Each of you, of course, are in different places in your life, okay, depending on your family situation or the neighborhood you live in or the communities that you're part of. You might be in a situation where there are people that need your help, okay? And again, this could be a family member, it could be a neighbor, it could be a friend. And you need to look at it as, you know what, God has put me into this situation. What can I do to be of help? Like Simon was just put into that situation where he was able to help Jesus. Okay. You may be asked to simply provide small support. Okay. You know, sometimes we just have to do little simple things to help out people. Okay. You know, whether that's doing yard work for an aging neighbor that can't do it, or maybe you just give a little bit of time, you know, at a food pantry, or you know, just the smallest of things can really make a big difference. Okay. Now, let me pull down the next one here. You might be asked to just give a little bit of help, or you might have to carry the entire weight. Sometimes you're in situations where you actually have to do a lot for somebody, and it might cause you to feel like, oh my gosh, why am I the one that has to help out this person? Okay? Why does it have to be my friend who's really going through a hard time? Okay? And I have to try to comfort them. All right? The reason why I point this out is because when you look at the Stations of the Cross, sometimes Simon is shown just carrying the back part of the cross, like you see at the very top, okay? And other times, they show Simon carrying the whole cross, like Jesus was so worn down and exhausted that he couldn't even carry any of it. So if you could imagine, we talked last year about how heavy, those crosses were. I mean, even to carry just a beam, if it was just the cross beam, that would have been very, very difficult. And you could imagine being Simon like, man, I didn't sign up for this, okay? Did he help a little bit? Did he carry the whole thing? We don't know for sure, but again, that's kind of how life is. You know, sometimes you just have to do the small things to help out somebody, or you might be the person that really has to step up and help out completely. Okay, and then the last bullet point that I want to have here, it says, you will be remembered by who you helped with your service. All right, think about this for a moment. Simon, and again, we know nothing about him other than the fact that he was from Cyrene and he happened to be there. But here we are 2,000 years later talking about him. Okay? The help that he provided Jesus has immortalized him. I mean, if you think about that, this man who probably was a nobody in terms of history, and here he is. You can find him in every Catholic church in the world. All right? In a church, whether he's on a stained glass window or he's a statue, or he's a mobile hanging from the ceiling. I've seen all kinds of different types of Stations of the Cross, but there he is in our Catholic Church today just because he did that. Okay. Now you might say, well, I'm never going to end up, obviously, in the Bible, or they're not going to have a statue of me in a church. But you know, when you do little things to help out people, that person who you helped out is going to remember. All right? You might not win an award. Again, you might not have a statue made of yourself, but you will be remembered by that person who you helped. So I have another story that I want to share with you, and this is one that's a little more personal for me, but I want to try to drive home this idea that, you know what, when someone does something for you, no matter how big or small, you never forget. So my story goes all the way back to 1976, long before any of you were born. And since we're starting the school year, this story has to do with the start
I'm
Oh,
out
they
front
schooled
when you
you.
come get your kids.
So in 1976, I
Thank
was
you.
5 years old, and I was ready for kindergarten. Okay? How many of you remember your first day of kindergarten? No, you don't remember? Not even kind of? I bet you got a picture somewhere at home of your first day of kindergarten. Okay? I bet you do. Well, I'll tell you, my first day of kindergarten was not mom or dad or someone walking me into the building with my little backpack and taking a picture and giving a hug and then saying it's going to be all great and then leaving. Okay, no, none of that. I had to ride the bus the very first day of my kindergarten year. And I don't know if any of you have ever had to ride a bus, like a school bus. I don't think anyone here at St. Simon has. But back in the day, where I lived and the school I went to, I rode the bus every day to school. In fact, I did that for 10 years. All right? Now, if you've ever seen in the movies what school buses look like in movies, how do they portray a bus full of school kids? It's chaotic. All right? And you've got lots of yelling and screaming and bullying going on. And let me tell you, just for the record, that's not just Hollywood, okay? That's what riding a school bus is really like. It's a scary thing. And if you're 5 years old and it's your first day of kindergarten and your mommy takes you and says it's going to be all right, now get on the school bus, it's pretty scary. So to this day, I've never forgotten about the nervousness that I had. I mean, I was probably that tall. So anyway, I get on the school bus, I climb up the steps there, and I look down the row of the bus, and of course, the bus is completely full with all kinds of kids, all of them pretty much older than me, from first grade all the way up to high school. And of course, what thing was I really worried about at that moment? Where am I going to sit? Right? I just want to be able to sit and just kind of be to myself. And again, I'm 5 years old. So I get up there and I'm going down the main aisle of the bus, and of course there's no seats. And again, it's almost kind of like something out of a movie. You know, it's like if there is a spot, someone's like, no, you can't sit here. Okay? So I keep moving. And then I see an empty spot. And of course, it's almost like a ray of light comes down from heaven. Oh, there's the seat. And I went there, and there was this high school age girl who said, you can sit here. And I was like, thank you, God. So I sit down, and I sat with her. I never said a word at all, of course. And I got to school, and I can't remember the rest of the day, but I remember the trip there to school. Well, that night, my mom asked me how things went, and I was like, it was all right, you know. And there was this one girl that gave me a seat on the bus. Oh, it was so wonderful. And of course, Mom was like, well, do you want to write a note to her? I was like, yeah, I do. So I wrote a little note. I cannot remember what I actually wrote, but I do remember the 3 words that I put at the end of the note. You know what the 3 words were? I love you. I said, I love you. So the next day, I got on the bus, and on the second day, there were lots of empty seats. It was one of those where the first day of school, everyone rides to see, to know that they're on the bus route. On the second day, there were lots of students that didn't ride the bus. So there were plenty of seats to have on that second time. But I remember walking with my backpack, and I had the note in my hand, and I walked right by her, and I tossed it to her, and I went a couple seats back. And I sat, in an empty seat. So she was my first crush. And you know why she was my first crush? Because when I needed a seat, she was there, and granted to her, I was just a little 5-year-old kid, why not sit with her? But anyway, she did that. So here I am, 44 years later, and even though I don't remember her name, because I never knew her name, I've never forgotten that. So she was kind of like my Simon. All right, like I ought to make a statue of her because when I really needed someone to cut me a break, and I was only a kindergartner, she did that. So next time you do something for somebody and you just think, it's no big deal. Well, it might not be a big deal, but it is to that person. It is to that person. Okay, there you go. And again, I can't remember much else about my kindergarten year, but I've never forgotten about that. Okay, let's talk about the corporal works of mercy. And if you look on your outline here, how are we doing? We're ready for the list here. Now, you might already know these. What you might not be aware of is that they actually are based upon Matthew chapter 25, which is the parable about, let's see how awake everyone is here on a Monday. Matthew chapter 25 is about a parable about the sheep and the goats that we just talked about a little bit ago. Okay? Because in that story, again, the king says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me water. When I didn't have shelter, you made sure I had a home. When I was naked, you gave me clothing. When I was ill or in prison, you came and visited me. Well, all of that in the story are basically make up the corporal works of mercy. All right, so let's go ahead and list them here. And there is a traditional order, the way they appear in the Bible passage there. All right, so the first one is feed the hungry. Feed the hungry. And of course, there's lots of different ways that this can be accomplished. Feed the hungry. What's the next one? Are you saluting or? Well, that is one of them. Okay, that is one of them. It's typically not the second one, but that is one of them. So I'll give you credit for that. It's give water to the thirsty. So the list begins with the basic necessities. You need food, you need water. You need to be, well, that is one of them. But you need to be, or you'll be arrested. You need to be clothed. So clothe the naked. And then the fourth one is shelter the homeless. Who gave us that answer a moment ago? Somebody murmured it. Gabriel, you did that? Okay, well, I'll tell you, I'll give you credit. No one else will take it? I'll go ahead and snap it up. Visit the sick. Visit the sick. Can everybody read that? We doing okay? I know with that tan screen there. Okay. I'll read through them again. Visit the imprisoned. Visit the imprisoned. And then the last one, and this one's not mentioned in the parable, but it's kind of been added. And we know actually it's on your service hour sheet. It's bury the dead. Bury the dead. Okay? So let me read these over again. Feed the hungry, give water to the thirsty, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, visit the imprisoned, bury the dead. Those are the corporal works of mercy. They're called corporal because in Latin, corp means, did you say help?
Yeah.
Not quite, even though these do have to do with helping. Corp, where we get the word corpse, means body.
Yeah.
So the corporal works of mercy have to do with helping a person's bodily needs. Okay? You might know there's also a list of what are called spiritual works of mercy that deal with the spiritual needs of a person. Okay? All right, so now this next section of slides, I'm going to kind of move a little bit quicker through, a little bit at a greater speed. Usually I would spend a little bit more time on this, but it's like, how do you perform these corporal works of mercy? Okay? Well, in our community, and I know that things are different right now, okay? But you know, there are food pantries in our city, soup kitchens that you can help out at. Again, I realize that now it's a little bit dicey, but when you help out a soup kitchen or a food pantry, make donations, you of course are helping to feed the hungry. Okay. I'll mention this man here on the screen since I'm trying to give you stories here. Anyone ever heard of Lucius Newsom? Okay. Well, Lucius Newsom, you've heard of the Lord's Pantry? Okay. It's also known as Anna's House. Was founded by this man, Lucius Newsom. And Lucius Newsom, he passed away several years ago now, but he lived in Indianapolis, and he was the one that founded the Lord's Pantry. And he actually came here to St. Simon on a couple of different occasions. And he was very well known in the city. He always wore the overalls that you see there, and usually he had like a Colts hat or something. And he was in his 90s when he started this ministry. And he just had this booming, deep voice and just an incredibly charismatic man. And he was the one that started the Lord's Pantry. So if anyone deserved a statue, he probably would be one of those people. But he fed the hungry. That was his thing, okay? And that was his way of being a Christian. Yes?
So the free campus, like on the website, like went on like field trips, like before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you did your day of service, you probably did something that would fall into that category. It's one of the reasons why I put them on your service hour sheets. Again, I don't know how closely you pay attention to that, but that's kind of the idea. Okay? All right. Give drink to the thirsty. Now, I know that kind of seems a little bit less of something that needs to be done, but, you might remember a few years ago, do you remember we did a fundraiser for our sister parish down in Haiti? You remember doing that? We were trying to help raise money for a water filtration purification system so they can get clean drinking water. Okay, St. Simon's tried to do a lot in the last several years. So when we did that, we were as a community working to try to help people have water to drink. Okay? All right, clothe the naked. Again, I'm just kind of going to go through these kind of quickly because we'll talk about them later as the year goes along. But, probably the best way that our parish helps with clothing the naked is the St. Gianna Society. How many of you have helped out at any of the St. Gianna functions? Okay, which is a pro-life ministry to support women who either already have young children or who are pregnant and will, and who are in financial need. So St. Gianna's does a lot of great work. Again, with the way things are right now, I'm not sure how it's going to affect how the ministry is carried out, but I'm hoping that certainly there'll be some chances for everybody to help out with St. Gianna's at some point during the year. Okay? So again, I'm skipping over that. Okay, let me interrupt that list there with another story. And the next story, if you look, is about St. Martin of Tours. Everybody see that on your paper? Okay, so I want to share with you another story. This, of course, is a saintly story. Has anyone ever heard of St. Martin of Tours? Ellie, you've heard of St. Martin? Well, I think there's an island somewhere down in the Caribbean. Okay, the St. Martin, so, and probably named after him. Probably named after him. But I want to share with you a story about him. He's one of the more famous saints in our church's history. It says the shirt off his back. So obviously, which corporal work of mercy is this story going to be about? Clothing the naked. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about him. And again, what's in red, you can put down on the lines there. Okay. St. Martin of Tours was born in the 4th century, which in the context of history would have been in what century? What years? 4th century A.D. What years would that have been? When they talk about, when they number a century, no, not 1200s. If it's in the 4th century after Jesus' time, that's going to put it into the 300s. Okay? No, 4th. 4th, if you see there. So he lived in the 300s. Now the 300s was a pretty important time in history. Okay, there were two things that were happening. Number one, the church was beginning to spread, and Christianity was becoming an official religion that was recognized in the Roman Empire. And at the same time, the Roman Empire was beginning to. What ended up happening to the Roman Empire? It was falling. It was weakening. Okay, so he lived at a very interesting time period. Okay, world history. And anyway, he was an officer in the Roman army. So we're talking about a Roman soldier. And he was stationed in the province of Gaul. Now again, if I had my wonderful laminated map, I'd be able to show you where Gaul is. Maybe you might know anyway. Okay? But anyway, he was a Roman cavalry officer, and he was stationed in the province of Gaul. Well, he, in addition to being a Roman soldier, was an unbaptized catechumen. Okay? So I want you to add that to your story also. He was an unbaptized catechumen. Now, unbaptized means he hadn't been baptized, of course. Does anyone remember what a catechumen is? Catechumen? Lily, was that a hand or was that a wave? There's a stretch, okay. All right. John?
Is that somebody that lives in the catacombs?
No, not the catacombs. Good guess, though. Now, this is actually a word we still use today. What does it mean to be a catechumen? Sienna?
You're like joining the church.
Yeah, it's someone who wants to join the church. That's right. That's right. So he was a Roman soldier. He wanted to become a Christian. He wasn't baptized yet. Okay? Now, being stationed in Gaul at that time, there weren't a lot of Christians. Okay? Most people in that part of the Roman Empire were pagan. And of course, you can imagine that in the Roman army at that time, most Roman soldiers were not Christian at all. So he was kind of in a kind of by himself, so to speak. Okay? And there's a story that St. Martin, when he decided that he wanted to be a Christian, went to his commanding officer and said, sir, I don't know if you know, but I'm wanting to become a Christian. And being in the Roman army is really not compatible with that. I want to serve Christ. I don't want to serve Caesar. And by being in the army, no offense, but I really would like to be discharged from my position in the army. Well, when he made that request, the commanding officer said, absolutely, positively not. I think you're a coward and you're afraid of being killed in battle. And he's like, no, I'm not a coward. I have no fear of battle, but it's not compatible with my new beliefs. So I would like for you to discharge me from the ranks. Well, again, the answer was no. And according to the story, Martin wanted to prove that he wasn't a coward, and he told the commanding officer, he said, in the next battle, you can put me at the front line, but I'm not going to draw a sword. I'm not going to fight. I'll let myself be killed if that's what has to happen. So the commanding officer said, okay, next battle, you're going to be in the front row. And your choice will be either to defend yourself and fight, or let yourself be killed. It's up to you. Okay? So Martin was kind of like, well, the next battle, I'm probably going to be killed, because he was not going to fight back. Okay? All right. Let's continue the story here. So he was still in the army. Okay? That's actually not what he's remembered for. So according to tradition, again, he was a cavalry officer, so they rode on horseback, and they were riding into a town, his colony. And at the gate of the town, there was an old man who had almost no clothing on whatsoever. And it was like in the cold months of the year. I mean, it was like winter time. And this guy is sitting there at the gates. Of course, in ancient times, beggars often would sit at the entrance of a city hoping for, someone to give them money. In this case, maybe to give them something to clothe themselves. So you can see the painting here. He's riding on his horse, and of course he's dressed in his fine red Roman garb. And he sees this old man, and of course all these soldiers keep riding by, and they don't look at him at all. They ride right by him. They could care less about him. He's just trash to them. Well, when Martin sees the man, he stops. And he sees the man sitting there, and he can see the man is sitting there shivering cold. And Martin takes his military cloak, like a really big cape, and he took out his sword, and he cut his cape in half, and he gave the man half the cape so that he could cover himself, so that he'd be a little bit warmer. Then he rode on, not thinking anything of it. He saw a man who needed help, and he helped him out. Well, that night, according to the story, he had a dream where Jesus appeared to him. And the words that were said were, Martin, yet a catechumen, meaning you haven't even joined the church yet, has given me his cloak. All right? Now, that's the big reveal. So what happened in the story after he had that dream? What did he realize? He had a dream that night. He saw Jesus, and Jesus said, Martin, who is only a catechumen, has given me his cloak. This is the big reveal of the story. What had happened? What had happened? Danny?
I served them.
Yeah, he did. In fact, not only did he serve God, he literally gave his cloak to Jesus. So that old man that was sitting at the gate with almost no clothing, who was it? It was Jesus in disguise. Okay? It was Jesus in disguise. So he had helped out this man, not thinking, oh, I'm going to get something in return. It was, hey, there's someone in need. I'm going to take my valuable military cloak, cut it right in half, and give him half of it. Okay? So he basically had helped out Jesus without even knowing it. And of course, he was being told, well done. Well done. Okay? So yeah, now, can you see the analogy here? someone go back to what we started a little bit ago in our outline? His story is actually very similar to a story we've already talked about from the Bible. See if you can connect the dots here. See, Cameron? Okay, well, Simon helping out Jesus definitely kind of goes along with that, helping out Christ, okay? And I guess we might say Simon didn't really know who Jesus was, okay? In this case, Martin didn't know that that was Jesus, okay? Didn't know it at all, all right? So that's a good point, though. Let's see, Anna? Uh-huh. Exactly right. Yeah, whatever you did for the least of my brothers, including an old naked guy sitting outside at the gate, you help him, you're helping me. And that's exactly what Martin did. So that story embodies that parable. And of course, then Jesus says, well done, well done. Okay, just a couple more things about Martin. So, long story short, you remember what he had been told by his commanding officer in the next battle? They were going to put him in the front line so he'd be mowed down and killed. Well, it turns out that the Germanic army that his unit were about to fight made a peace treaty. And the campaign ended, and the next battle didn't happen. And then a new commander took over his unit, and basically, he's a little bit nicer guy, and said, you know what, you can leave. So he was dismissed from the army so that he could become a Christian. I mean, he really already was, but of course, he wanted to now serve the church. So he became a monk. And in 371, when he was much older, he was proclaimed the Bishop of Tours, which Tours was a city, still is today, in France. So he became a bishop. Now, back in those days, often people were proclaimed or acclaimed, which meant basically a congregation of people would say, we want you to be the bishop. You know, and they would just verbally just say, you're the one. So he was so popular that he was picked to become the new bishop of the city of Tours. Now, Martin became a very, very popular saint. In fact, in some cases, we use the word cultic because there were people so devoted to his memory. I mean, sometimes we hear that word cult, we think of something that's kind of ominous, but in this case, people just deeply devoted to him. And according to the stories, the cloak that he had cut in half, he had kept that. That's kind of, I don't want to say a souvenir, but he had it. And after he died, people who were devoted to him kept the cape, the cloak that he had, and it became a relic. Okay, as you might know, relics are objects that belong to holy people that are kept. All right. Well, they kept his cloak, and in fact, over the centuries, the kings of France, who had possession of it, would take it with them every time they went into a battle, because they believed that his cloak, would provide protection to them. The one thing I want to mention here, though, is in the Latin, the word for a cloak or a cape is cappa, which is like cape. So what happened was this relic was considered so valuable that they had priests whose job was to take care of the cloak. Okay? And those people became known as chaplains. Chaplain. You ever heard of chaplains? Well, in the military, priests who serve the needs of military members are called chaplains. So the kappa, chappa, that's where that came from. They also built little churches where the kappa, his sacred cape, could be stored so people could come and venerate it. All right, you know what we call little small churches today? Chapels. Okay? So the word chapel and chaplain comes from the fact that that cloak that he had was considered so sacred that they literally built churches to house it. Okay? I don't even know where it is today. You could probably do some research and find out where that is. Okay, the last thing I want to say about St. Martin is his feast day is on November 11th. November 11th. Now, there's some irony here to this. Does anyone know the significance of November 11th in the calendar? In addition to being his feast day? You know what November 11th? See, Anna? Well, it is. It is. That is true. But there's actually there's something else that's significant about that day. It's a holiday. We don't get it off from school, so maybe that's why people don't. It's who said that? Okay, yeah, it's Veterans Day. Okay, November 11th is Veterans Day. Now the reason why it's Veterans Day is not because of St. Martin. In World War I, when World War I ended, the armistice was signed on November 11th. So that's why they picked that day. In fact, it was 11th month, 11th day, 11th hour is when they ended World War I. But anyway, that's side information there. Now the irony to me is that on this day, when we remember all those people who have served in the military, we have St. Martin, who at some point didn't want to be in the military. Okay, remember he was even willing to give his own life before he would actually go in and fight. So November 11th is his feast day. Again, very popular saint. I wanted to share with you, and I actually had to bring this downstairs. I don't know if any of you noticed this in my room before, but this is a statue, a little small one, of St. Martin of Tours. And you can always know when you're looking at a statue of St. Martin because it shows him on a horse in Roman armor, and there's always like an old guy sitting there who has almost no clothing, and he cuts his cape in half and he gives it to him. So anytime you see that, you know, oh, that's St. Martin. St. Martin of Tours. Who's a great model of service. Okay? All right. Let's move on. Okay, getting back to our list of corporal works of mercy. I'm not going to take a lot of time for this. But again, whenever you help out organizations that provide clothing or home goods, things that people can't afford, in essence, you are helping to shelter the homeless. Have you ever heard of Habitat for Humanity? It's been around a long time. That's an organization that built houses for the poor. Okay? I know one of my brothers, when he was in high school, actually helped build a house for Habitat for Humanity. Okay, visiting the sick. Again, I know during this COVID time, we're a little bit restrained in what we can do, obviously, but visiting the sick, and not just necessarily family members, could be a great thing. Visit the imprisoned. Okay? One of the things that deacons often do as part of their ministry is they actually go to, prisons and jails to try to minister to those people that are in jail. Because God cares about people in jail also. Okay? People in nursing homes. I put that in the imprisoned category. The reason why I do that is because, that's an example of people who are in situations that, if they could, they would rather be somewhere else. And of course, getting visitations sometimes, unfortunately, doesn't happen very often. So when you do things like that, you are visiting the imprisoned. When you guys were in 5th grade, did you do the care packages for the soldiers overseas? Okay. I kind of put soldiers in this category also, even though we have a voluntary military, but there's people that are stationed overseas, and they have to do their time. And they can't see their family for months on end. And when they get those little care packages, it means a lot to them. Again, even if they don't know who you are. In fact, that makes it even more powerful. So, yeah. Okay. The last story I want to share with you, this is at the very bottom, is a more recent story. So I've shared some ancient stories. I've shared a biblical story with you. I've shared a story about me, which I guess also is ancient. But I want to share with you a little bit more recent story. So this is about St. John Paul II, who, of course, was our previous pope, 2 popes ago. And this story takes place in 1983. Okay? So when John Paul II was pope, he went to a prison in Italy, okay, just a couple days after Christmas. And he met with an inmate that you can see his picture, who was in the prison there. He was a Turkish man. He was there for as an assassin. Okay, his name was Mehmet Ali Aka. Down at the bottom, you see that little box there next to the photo. If you want to put his name, Mehmet Ali Aka. And he was serving a life sentence. In fact, the people in the country of Turkey were wanting to extradite him, which means they wanted to get him from the prison there, and they wanted to bring him back to Turkey so they could charge him for things he had done also. Okay? So this guy was in prison. He deserved to be in prison. There's no doubt about it. But John Paul II made a point of going to this prison, as you can see in the picture there, meeting with this man one-on-one. Okay? Now here's where the story gets weird. His Holiness had a special connection with this young man named Mehmet Ali Agha. Does anyone know? There was a reason why the Pope went to this prison to see this guy. Anybody know? Well, 2 years earlier, in 1981, John Paul was in St. Peter's Square, and he was meeting a huge crowd of people. There were thousands of people there. Okay, because you know in St. Peter's, they can fit tens of thousands of people in the square there. And Mehmet Ali Agha was there. And the Pope was moving through the crowd. You know, he's got that little vehicle, little car that they move him around in. Okay? And it was a nice day, and the car was going through. And of course, he had some bodyguards with him, but the Pope was shaking hands and kissing babies and doing all the stuff that you see people do. And Mehmet Ali Agha moved up very close to where the Pope was. And he took out a pistol and at point blank range fired multiple shots into John Paul II, wounding him seriously. In fact, it's incredible that the Pope didn't die, given his age. So they took him to the hospital, and of course they did emergency surgery, and he survived. But it was Mehmet Ali Agha who had tried to kill him, okay? And that's why he was in prison. And here the Pope was going to visit with him, okay? So you might say, well, who in the world would ever consider going to see the person who tried to kill him, okay? But the Pope did that, and he publicly forgave him. He said, I forgive him completely, all right? So Agha was given that kind of forgiveness. So you talk about visiting the imprisoned. Well, imagine going to a prison to see the person that tried to do you physical, mortal harm, okay? That was a big deal. It's interesting, Agha was in prison. He served 30 years for actually, not only had he tried to kill the Pope, he actually had committed a murder before, okay? So, in our country, if you get a life sentence, that means life. In some other countries, it might mean 30 years. But he just got out of prison about 10 years ago. He's still alive today. But when John Paul II passed away in 2005, which is 15 years ago now, Agha said that he was very sad, and he considered himself a friend of the Pope, okay? And that he was grateful for him giving that forgiveness to him. So that's a pretty extreme example, not only of forgiveness, but also an example of someone performing a corporal work of mercy to a person that you would probably be tempted to say, well, who cares about it? Well, John Paul II cared about it, and it was a very famous moment. Okay? All right, so that's that story there. Now, we're going to talk some more about John Paul II in our next unit. That'll probably be starting next week. And we'll get more into his life, because his life was extraordinary. And this is one of the moments that's definitely memorable. Okay, we're almost done, I promise. All right, I got the bury the dead. I said honor the dead also, okay? And you might, that's like, what do you mean bury the dead? I mean, that's kind of silly. Well, if you go back into medieval and ancient times, making sure that a person got a proper burial was not always a given thing. So that's kind of how it became kind of that. But, I would go beyond that. It's keeping the memory of the dead alive. If you're Catholic, or even if you're not, going to a funeral mass for people who have died. Mass intentions. Does anyone know what mass intentions are? When a person's name is said at a mass, okay, every mass there's an intention for someone. So if you have a family member who's passed, you can go to the church office and they have a big calendar, and you can purchase for a very small amount of money. It's basically just kind of an offering, and they can have that mass said for that person. So it's a good thing to do. Okay, visiting the cemetery. Okay, I know sometimes people like on the 4th of July or Veterans Day or Memorial Day will go out and put little flags on the graves of especially people who are in the military. Those are kind of things that a lot of people don't even think about, you know, but by doing those kind of things, you are performing a corporal work of mercy. Okay, real quickly, if you would look at your, which by the way, if you haven't already written down at the bottom, the little story about the Pope, you can just put down that Akka attempted to kill the Pope, and the Pope then visited him in prison and forgave him. That's what I want you to know about that story. Okay? Now, real quickly, and because you guys are 8th graders, I don't need to probably talk about this in too much detail. We are going to have service hours, but they are going to be modified, okay, because of circumstances that we're under. So if you'll direct your attention to the service hour sheet that I gave to you, real quickly, there's just a couple changes. And I physically made them on the document so you can see what things actually got that are changed. So for your monthly requirements, your monthly requirement to start the year, now it's very possible and hopeful, okay, that at some point when things begin to become a little bit normal, we may revert back to traditional requirements. But until then, your monthly requirement is going to be 3 hours. Okay? It's usually 5. It's going to be 3 hours per month. Okay? So that's a reduction. You do not need to worry about categories. Okay? Last year you had to have at least 2 out of the 3 categories every month. You do not need to worry about that. Okay? Now, I do have the categories on the paper, and I would like for you, if you can, to keep track of that, but it's not required. So if everything you do is at home, that's fine. If everything you did was church parish, then that's fine. If it's something you did community, that's fine also, but it doesn't matter. Okay? So don't worry about that 2 out of the 3 categories. Okay? I've got that crossed off. I do want you to have signatures. Okay? So you know what that entails. I do want you to submit it on time, and what we're going to be doing, since we usually will have class on Friday, the due dates for each month is going to be the first Friday of the month. Okay? So I believe the first Friday in September is September 4th. So if you want to go ahead and write down the due date, Friday, September 4th, which I think is going into the Labor Day. The Labor Day weekend, I think. So Friday, September 4th. And also, if for this first month, just to kind of help you out, if there's anything you did in the month of July that you thought was service-worthy, then you can count that also. Okay? So you've got a couple weeks before this first one will be due. And again, there's really not a lot of requirements for it. And just like last year, just a brief description of what you did, clear but concise. Okay? If you do babysit, which I imagine probably is going to be a pretty popular thing, that's fine. Just give me the ages of the children that you babysat. Okay? And again, make sure it's not your best friend playing a video game with each other. And I do want you to use the form. Okay? I'm going to give you one every single month. You might be saying, well, how come it's white, it's not colored? Well, I don't have a lot of colored paper on hand, so I might have to go with the boring white for one. Okay? But I'll give you one every month, but I do want you to use that form. Okay? Are there any questions about that? Now, obviously, we are modifying these requirements because of the situation we're in. We know it's harder for you to necessarily get out and do community-type activities. We don't want you to feel pressured to get into situations that you're not comfortable with. But I think that you can do 3 hours in a month, if nothing else, helping out at home. Okay? This is designed for you to be able to meet the requirement pretty easily. If you can't, then maybe you need to start carrying water more for your family and, earning your keep, so to speak. Okay, I don't need to talk about the categories, because you know what those already are. Okay, so that's our outline. So what I'm going to do now at this time is I have a pretty easy assignment for you. It's just a half sheet of questions. It's over exactly what we just covered. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and put your stations up and have something to write with, and you can take your mask down.
Excuse me, for Lucolians.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I'm going to give you the half sheet. And these questions are pretty simple. And if you can complete it, you'll turn in to me. If not, which I can't imagine why you wouldn't be able to finish it, you can turn in on Wednesday. But otherwise, you will turn it in. And I have a black tray up here. This will be where you'll turn your assignments in. Okay? Being socially distanced, of course. Okay? All right, so let me go ahead and